Kids, head back to class. Kids, you can head back to class. Grown-ups, if you want to go ahead and turn in your Bible, I told you we're going to be in Psalm 73. We're going to work our way through the entirety of that psalm together this morning under the premise of what do we do when life doesn't make sense? And so we're going to read all 28 verses together in a couple of chunks of Psalm chapter 73. While you're turning there, I want to teach you a new word. Not all of you, if you're under the age of probably 50, you know what the word means, but the rest of you are going to learn a new word today. Do we know what the word FOMO means? Anybody? Y'all look at me like I spoke a foreign language. So in kids speak, FOMO is a reference to the idea of fear of missing out. Okay? It's a particular form of anxiety that has become more prevalent as social media influence has increased. When I was a kid, if all of my buddies were hanging out at Derek's house for a party and I didn't get an invite, guess what? I didn't even know about it because nobody told me about it. They were all just there hanging out. Now I can hop on Snapchat or Instagram or whatever and see that all of my friends are having fun, and here I am all alone by myself at home. I have fear of missing out. I can look at all of your beautiful pictures from the beach and go, that's not fair. I wish I was there with them. Everybody else got invited to Heather's wedding. Why didn't I? And so there's this kind of new type of anxiety that's forming, particularly in kids like age 25 and down, where they live in this fear of, did I make the wrong choice? Did I make the wrong friends? Choosing to stay home and study instead of go out? Choosing to hang out with these people instead of, did I somehow mess up in a way? Am I missing out on the good stuff that life has to offer? And I wanted to teach you that phrase because in many ways, Psalm 73 begins with, for lack of a better term, spiritual FOMO. Okay, we're going to read this passage written by a man by the name of Asaph. Asaph is a Levite who appears to be some type of musician or poet. He is essentially a 7th century BC worship leader. Okay, he's in the temple, he writes songs, he teaches people songs, he teaches them about God through music. And the first half of this psalm is essentially Asaph wondering, am I missing out? Did I make some mistakes? Did I, somewhere along the line, take a wrong turn? Is all of this worth it? Am I missing the good stuff that life has to offer? So let's take a look here. We're going to read the first several verses together, beginning in verse 1. God is indeed good to Israel, to the pure in heart. But as for me, my feet almost slipped. My steps nearly went astray. For I envied the arrogant. I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have an easy time until they die, and their bodies are well fed. They are not in trouble like others. They are not afflicted like most people. Therefore, pride is their necklace, and violence covers them like a garment. Their eyes bulge out from fatness. The imaginations of their hearts run wild. They mock and speak maliciously. They arrogantly threaten oppression. They set their mouths against heaven, and their tongues strut across the earth. Therefore his people turn to them and drink in their overflowing waters. And they say, how can God know? Does the Most High know everything? Here's essentially what's happening in these first 11 verses. Asaph is looking at the world around them and going, all of the people that are opposed to God, that are blaspheming God, all of the people who are arrogant and prideful, all of the people who boast and deceive, their tongue runs wild across the earth, all of the people who are kind of bullies and malicious, I look at them and they're all doing really well. They're all prosperous. They're all in positions of power. They all seem to be well respected. These people who are supposed to be seen as wicked and evil and rebellious, everyone just listens to all that they have to say and laps up their wicked words, he says in verse 11. I look at the way the world is going and I see all of these people who have made terrible choices and they all seem to be doing really well. This doesn't make sense. And it's one of those moments where you stand here 2,500, 3,000 years after the words were written and go, ditto. Right? Do you not look at our world and say the same thing today in 2024? Do you not look at the people who got famous off of malicious, sinful behavior? Whether it was alcoholism, or it was sexual sex tapes, or it was deceitfulness. People who got wealthy off of manipulating people, lying to people, taking advantage of people. People who've risen to positions of prominence and power by making deals and compromising their morality and telling lies and getting away with them. Do you not look around at the people in positions of influence and power, whether it's the influence of popularity and fame, the influence of financial wealth, or the influence of political power, and go, where are the good people? I mean, honestly, like when you look at things on the news, do you not sometimes ask yourself the question, where are the good people? Because none of those people are good. None of those people are the kind of people I'd like to have a cup of coffee with. And then the next question is, that doesn't seem fair. Aren't those people supposed to suffer? Aren't those people supposed to have consequences? Aren't those people supposed to, have to pay for their crimes? And I think part of what's happening there is, whether we admit it or not, each of us has this kind of innate sense of karma-based justice. Now, we would never say karma because we don't believe in karma, but we do kind of believe in karma. I mean, just think of all of the stories, the movies, the TV shows, the books that you read, where there's a big, bad, mean villain who takes advantage of people, who lies, who bullies, who manipulates, and then what happens at the end of the story? They get what's coming to them, right? And so it doesn't matter if we're watching Back to the Future and we're talking about Biff Tannen. Okay, it doesn't matter if we're reading Matilda and we're reading about Miss Trunchbull, the big bully principal. It doesn't matter if we're watching Frozen and we're going to watch Hans do his thing. We want the bad guy to get what's coming to him. He should live in exile. He should be punished. He should get his just deserts. And yet real life doesn't actually work that way. In fact, interesting statistic from a Gallup poll that was done about 10 years ago. Do you know that kids that grow up in school that get in trouble for bullying, okay? They're too aggressive on the playground, they manipulate people, they take things from other kids, they call names, that those kids, on the average, earn about 25% more money over their lifetime than their average peer? Because it turns out that in a capitalist business mindset, people with no morals can do really, really well for themselves. People who don't feel bad about lying and getting away with it. People who don't mind taking advantage of their customer. People who use people and then when they're not worth anything, throw them away. Those kind of people can go really, really far in life. And while the karmatic judgment part of us wants to go, well, no, eventually they'll get what's coming to them, evidence indicates that no. Often when you look around the world at the people who are doing well, whether it is in 600 BC when Asaph is writing, 700 BC, 800 BC probably, or it's in 2024 AD, the situation is the same. I'm going to read the same words to you out of the Message just to drive home the point. I like the way it paraphrases this. He says, I was looking up to the people at the top, and I was envying the wicked who had made it, for they have nothing to worry about, not a care in the whole wide world. They are pretentious, they are arrogant, they are violent. They are pampered and overfed, decked out in silk bowls of silliness. They jeer using words to kill. They bully their way with words. They're full of hot air, loud mouths disturbing the peace. When people actually listen to them and follow them, can you believe it? Again, those words could be written today. That doesn't mean good people don't ever succeed. It doesn't mean bad people don't ever fail. It just means if you're looking for a movie ending where these people are going to somehow have some tragedy and get what's coming to them, it may not happen. It didn't happen in Asaph's day. It doesn't always happen in our day. And we're left with the question, what do we do when life doesn't make sense? The next few verses, Asaph takes it even a little bit further. He says, look at them, the wicked. They are always at ease, and they increase their wealth. Did I purify my heart and wash my hands in innocence for nothing? For I am afflicted all day long and punished every morning. If I had decided to say these things, I would have betrayed your people. Verse 13, I think, is probably the most important question in the first half of the psalm. Because the question he's asking is this: why did I bother to follow God if these wicked people are getting all the good stuff? Was it worth it to sacrifice and try to live a holy life when these liars are the ones living in prosperity? Is it worth trying to be obedient and keep the commands when these immoral people are the ones who have all the power? Is this really worth it? Did I cleanse my heart and wash my hands for nothing? David Platt, when he's writing about this psalm, talks about his own experience going through college. And he says that when he was a freshman in college, he went to the same school as many of the students that he had grown up going to church with in high school. They all attended the local university. And he watched as many of his friends fully engaged in the college lifestyle, joining fraternities, going to parties, experimenting sexually, experimenting with alcohol, experimenting with drugs. And he said, the part of my brain that grew up in a conservative church kept waiting for them to crash. Surely they're going to get what's coming to them, right? Surely they're going to hit rock bottom. Surely they're going to flunk out of school, or they're going to get in trouble with the dean, or they're going to get... And he goes, and I kept watching, and honestly, they seemed to be really, really happy. They got invited to all the parties. They always had a girl on their arm. They were doing just well enough in school to get by. They never seemed to hit rock bottom, and I couldn't understand. And he says, I began to ask myself this same question. Is it really worth it? Is it really worth denying myself, picking up my cross, and following Jesus, when I could just act like them and get everything the world has to offer? If there's no good people get good things and bad people get bad things system in the world, then why should I bother being one of the good people? For his part, Asaph answers the question in the next part. Takes a turn here in verse 16. He says, when I tried to understand all this, it seemed hopeless until I entered God's sanctuary. And then I understood their destiny. Indeed, you put them in slippery places. You make them fall into ruin. How suddenly they become a desolation. They come to an end swept away by terrorists, like one waking from a dream. Lord, when arising, you will despise their image. When I became embittered and my innermost being was wounded, I was a fool and didn't understand. I was an unthinking animal toward you. Yet I am always with you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel. And afterwards you will take me up to glory. Whom do I have in heaven but you? And I desire nothing on earth but you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Those far from you will certainly perish. You will destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, God's presence is my good. I have made the Lord God my refuge, so I can tell about all you do. I want to point out a few things about the ending of this psalm. Number one, he is talking, at least partially here, about judgment at the end of time. He doesn't say that clearly, but the code words are all there. He talks about desolation. He talks about after this being taken to glory. He talks about their eternal destiny. This is the language of judgment. So the first thing Asaph notices is he looks at those people and he goes, well, it may look like they've got it all figured out. They may be prosperous and rich and popular and influential and all of those things, but he is reminded of the fact that a day of judgment is coming. And when that day of judgment comes, those who are faithful to God, who have become followers of God, will be taken to be with Him in glory. And those who have been rebellious to God, unfaithful to God, to use His language, they will find their desolation awaiting them. They will find destruction and punishment awaiting them. And so the first thing that brings comfort to him is he goes, all right, they might have it all right now, but are we really going to trade 70 years, 80 years, 100 years of prosperity and goodness and is supposed to spend eternity in judgment and condemnation, as opposed to 100 years of faithful living and an eternity in glory with God? That seems like a no-brainer. So the first place he takes comfort and encouragement from is the knowledge that judgment is coming. That the way things appear right now is not the way they're always going to be. But that's not all that he's saying. That's not the only point. Because he's not just making the case that the reason to follow Jesus is a better ending to the story, or the reason to be obedient to God in this case. He doesn't yet know about Jesus. The reason to be obedient to God is not just a better ending. He's telling you it's better here and now. My favorite verse in the Psalm as I was studying this week is verse 26. He said, or verse 25. He says, "Who do I have in heaven but you? And I desire nothing on earth but you." Let me rephrase that. Let me repeat that. Who do I have in heaven but you? And I desire nothing on earth but you. Can you say that? If I had two buckets, and in bucket number one, I put all of the good things this world has to offer. Business success, a nice big savings account, fancy vacations, a nice house, a nice car. All the financial success. All of the popularity and acceptance. You got a whole bunch of great friends and 150 people like every picture you put on Facebook, and everybody calls you and they check in on you when you're sick. You are well loved. And you have power and influence. People do what you say. Even your children listen to you, which is a miracle in and of itself. And I put all of that in one bucket. Power, popularity, wealth, accomplishment. And in the other bucket, I put a relationship with God. And you don't get any of that. You're going to have poverty instead of wealth. Loneliness instead of popularity. No power, just humility and service. But you get the presence of God. Which bucket are you picking? Can you say with our psalmist, "There's nothing I desire on this earth but God"? He goes on in verse 28 to say that God himself is his good. He says, "The presence of God is my good." I don't follow God because of what I get from him. I don't follow God because of the blessings that may or may not come from him. The presence of God itself is my good. That's what I get from the equation. And part of why I picked this psalm, we're kind of in this weird place. We had a weird month, right? We did church in the park, and I was gone for a week, and then we had VBS Sunday. I'm going to be gone again next week, so didn't really have a long series. I want one scripture I can do on one Sunday, and part of why I picked this one is because I grow increasingly concerned that the American church likes to use God as a tool to get the things that we want. And whether it's the health and wealth gospel, the prosperity gospel, where we tell you if you'll just believe and be faithful, then God will make you happy and healthy and you have a great job and financial prosperity. And I just want to go, have you ever read about Paul? Okay? Faithful didn't have a great life, honestly. Whether it is those trying to use their faith to gain power, to move up, to win an elected office, or to get someone they think is important, and we're going to get power, and then we're going to change the country through sheer force. And increasingly, in our worship songs, in our preaching from churches, and in our personal lives, we have this belief that if we can just trick God into blessing us, then we'll have all the good stuff. And I just want to say to you, He is the good stuff. He's the good stuff. When you choose to follow Jesus and have a relationship with God, do you know what you're promised? You're not promised wealth. You're not promised health. You're not promised power. You're not promised security. You're not promised safety. You're not promised a long life. You're promised Jesus. And that's enough. He's the good stuff. Stop thinking that you need Jesus and what's in the other bucket. Might you get it? Possibly. But that is not what we exist to pursue. And what happened to Asaph is he was looking at all of these people, and he's looking at all the power and all the wealth and all the pleasure and all the things they had, and then he looked at God and went, if I got to choose between what they have and the presence of God, I'll choose the presence of God because He's the good stuff. Better is one day in His courts. Better is one day in His house than 1,000 anywhere else. That's what we sang about this morning. By way of metaphor or illustration, let me just kind of explain it this way. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are in a parking lot, one of those shopping center parking lots, okay? And on one side of the parking lot is a really nice fine dining restaurant. They don't take reservations, so you know that if you're going to go there, it's going to be like an hour and a half to get a table. And then when you order whatever you're going to order, whatever your idea of fine dining is, whether it's perfectly made lasagna or a grilled filet or whatever you like, this is what they serve. But you know it's going to be probably an hour to get your table, probably 20, 25 minutes before your food comes out. It's going to be kind of pricey. It's date night for your anniversary or whatever. And so that's choice number one. And on the other side of the parking lot is a Little Caesars. Okay? Now, Little Caesars, of course, is famous for their, I don't think it's $5 anymore, but for years it was their $5 hot and ready classic, right? You walk in, you hand them a $5 bill, you leave with a pizza seconds later. Okay? And so you're standing there in the parking lot and you have a couple of choices. And imagine with me for a moment that you've chose to go into the fine dining restaurant. And you're sitting there in the little waiting area, waiting on them to call your number for your little thing to buzz. And you keep looking out the window and you see person after person leaving with their $5 hot and ready pizza. Now, I don't know how you feel about Little Caesars pizza, but can we all at least agree it's not gourmet? All right? It's, however you feel about it. It was my grandparents' favorite. I had someone at VBS, we had it one night at VBS, someone said to me, listen, I don't like a lot of sauce or crust. I like that it's just toppings on cardboard. That's what I'm looking for in a pizza. And I went, well, then this is your pizza. We got the right thing. But whatever you feel about it, even if you really like it, we can all agree it's not gourmet, right? But as you're sitting there and your stomach begins to growl, and you're waiting, and you don't know how much longer it's going to be, and you see person after person leaving with a hot, steaming pizza, there might be part of your brain that begins to go, maybe I made the wrong choice. And they look pretty happy, right? And they're going to go home and they're going to eat, and they'll be done and cleaned up before I even get a table. Maybe I made the wrong choice. But I'm just telling you, I don't know what your experience with nice restaurants are. When you take that first bite of filet, or chicken parm, or lasagna, or whatever it is that you've ordered at this restaurant, there's not a single person in the world who wishes it tasted like Little Caesars pizza. Because when you get a bite of the good stuff, it reminds you of how cheap the other stuff is. What Asaph discovers as he goes to this psalm, what I want to communicate to you this morning, is that God is the good stuff. I know that at times that shortcut to get ahead seems really attractive. I know that at times using your tongue to tear somebody down so you can feel a little bit better about yourself, it seems really attractive. I know that at times compromising to make a deal or to fit in or whatever the case may be, it seems really attractive. But I just want you to know, God is the good stuff. And everything else is, it might be cheap and quick and really convenient. But it's not what your soul really needs. And as those who follow Jesus, our task is to get to the point where we can speak the words of verse 26 in full sincerity. Verse 25, sorry, I did it again. The only thing on earth my heart's desire is you. The only thing on earth that my heart desires is you. The last thing I'll point out is, as we get ready to worship together one more time, is I want you to, if you've got your Bible, to just look back at verse 16 and 17. I want to read them to you again, and I want you to see when the change took place in his heart. When he moved from wondering why life wasn't fair, when he moved from wondering why all these wicked people were succeeding, to understanding what it was to live in the presence of God. It begins in verse 16 and 17. He said, when I tried to understand all this, it seemed hopeless. Until when? Until I entered God's sanctuary. And then I understood their destiny. In the first 15 verses of this psalm, it tells you that he's looking at the wicked, I think 3 times. 3 times he says, look at the wicked. I looked at those in power. I looked at those. And then in verse 17, he looks at God. everything else pales in comparison. He walks into God's presence in his sanctuary, and everything else pales in comparison. Sure, when you're starving and you're not at your table yet, maybe the Little Caesars pizza looks appetizing. But take that first bite of filet, and you'll realize that you are living the good stuff. And so I want to encourage you this morning. We're going to sing it as a song in just a moment. To turn your eyes to God, to see him in all of his glory, and to know with your heart that he's what your soul longs for. He's the good stuff.